Welcome to Chatting with Ingram. I'm Philip Ingram, and today I'm talking to Pierre Racz, the CEO of the Canadian Company Genetec and a world-renowned speaker on all matters security. Warning, you will actually learn something. Pierre, thank you very much indeed for coming to speak to me on the Chatting with Ingram podcast series. I was at your Connect DX virtual trade show the other day, but didn't get the chance to hear the keynote that you put out. Can you give me some of the highlights that you brought out in that?
The gist of my talk was that until now, sophisticated sensory organs have evolved alongside of substantial cognitive abilities needed to process, understand, and make sense of those inputs. And with AI, we're given sensory information at human complexity levels to contraptions with the cognitive ability of earthworms. We ought not marvel that when such contraptions guess the right answer. Instead, we should recognize that those contraptions, when they get it right, are guessing, and we should further be alarmed at how disastrously bad wrong guesses can be.
Yep.
And this had two aspects to it. It had the first aspect, which is the engineering aspect, that if we know how these devices fail, we can better integrate the existence of the false positives and the false negatives of these failures into our system engineering. And second, that on a sociological level, we should also understand that these devices are not thinking, and that we should put the human into the loop and make sure that the human actually does apply its ability to make judgments based on both on the outcomes of these devices and on the inputs we give to these devices, because errors in the training set or things that we don't notice in the training set could cause these devices to make these disastrous failures. As an example, there was a system that was designed to recognize fish, but there was one type of fish that was really, all the pictures it had were of trophy fishing contests, and there were always fingers that were holding the fish. And the AI learned that fingers was the distinguishing characteristic of that species, which of course is not what we expect.
So are you seeing examples of where AI and it's the lack of understanding of the application of AI is having impacts into the wider security world at the moment, or are we too early in bringing that level of technology in?
No. It absolutely has an impact. So, one of my statements was that we should be it wasn't suspicious, but we should be wary of technology that works the best when we need it the most. So there is a lot of interest in facial recognition. Now, facial recognition works best on crowds of innocent people, but the bad guys know how to make countermeasures. So in my talk, I presented a few examples of these countermeasures, which lowers the confidence score of these artificial intelligence programs, and I use the word with derision, such that it doesn't recognize it. And so the people who we want the system to recognize the most are the ones that it's going to recognize the least, and the innocent people that are going about their days are the ones whose privacy is being intruded upon uselessly.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I was chatting to a former super recognizer with the Metropolitan Police, and he sees the facial recognition technology providing the first filter for the super recognizers then to get in and look through it and provide that human oversight and human filter. So what you're saying, I think, is that the human in the loop is critical still and will remain critical no matter how good the so-called artificial intelligence technology gets.
Absolutely. So have the super recognizer in the loop. If you're using it as a filter, that is the proper application. So, we let the computer do the heavy lifting, and then we can let the human provide the intuition and the creativity.
Now, just before I was talking to you, I was having a very interesting conversation about blockchain and the application of blockchain with artificial intelligence. And blockchain is all about taking the human out of the loop in the decision making. So can you see a scenario where the blockchain with so-called artificial intelligence in a security scenario would actually make us less secure rather than more secure?
I just don't understand that statement that blockchain is about taking the human out of the loop. What blockchain is about is distributed record management.
Yep.
And there are different flavors of blockchain, and you shouldn't be too confused by the cryptocurrency application, where the number one goal of those cryptocurrency is anonymity. Whereas blockchains are used in many things. In particular, there's the software configuration management technology called Git, which is used to have a massive distribution of the files that comprise pieces of software, such as the Linux operating system. In fact, it was Linus Torvald who sort of invented that application. Mm-hmm. And the way that works is the names of your files are the cryptographic fingerprints of the files. And because there is an astronomically low probability of two different files with two different contents having the same cryptographic fingerprint, I can safely copy all my files from my disk to your hard disk. And if there is a collision, it's because it is the same content. So in security, the way we use it at Genetec, because our Clear ID product is based on that, is our blockchain is not at all based on anonymity. In fact, it is highly authenticated, and the payload is encrypted to ensure that even at rest, we can only the people that have been authorized to access the content are able to. And because it's a distributed record system, you can have as many copies as are needed of this data. And so it makes it very hard to destroy. It makes it actually hard to destroy or even adulterate the contents of the blockchain, because one of the characteristics of the blockchain is that the current block will contain the cryptographic fingerprint of its progenitor block, and so on and so forth. So if the probability of being able to change the content of a block and come up with the same cryptographic fingerprint is astronomically difficult. And we can go through the math that it's currently with a 256-bit fingerprint. It's about the equivalent of mapping any given document to one of the atoms one of the 10 to the 80 atoms in the visible universe. And that's why I say it's an astronomically hard problem.
That problem, is it not magnified by the regulatory framework that we're working in? Because if you can't get rid of the information that's in there, and within that information that's in the blockchain, there's personally identifiable data. Under European General Data Protection Regulation, one of the requirements in that is immutability. So for someone to request it to be deleted, but if it can never be deleted, can that therefore ever be GDPR compliant?
Absolutely. So you may or may not know that since about more than 5 years, our hard disks are equipped with something that permits crypto shredding. Basically, there is a unique random fingerprint random password that is created with when you initialize the hard disk. And when that password is destroyed, the content of the disk is basically undecipherable gibberish. So the same thing is true with the blockchain. Although the blockchain is immutable, the associated decryption keys in the payload is encrypted, and by destroying the encryption keys or the decryption keys, you can actually be GDPR compliant.
Okay.
And actually, funny anecdotes about Bitcoin. So some clever people in China managed to get around censorship by actually putting in censored material in the Bitcoin blockchain, and there's no way for the government to get rid of it.
Fascinating. The application of new technologies is certainly the way forward. But the impression I'm getting that I get is that the security industry itself is very backward-leaning and in UK terminology, conservative with a small c, so very reluctant to change. I know Genetec is leading the way in many of these areas. What is it that's setting Genetec apart and enabling you to lead the way?
Okay, first of all, I don't say backward leaning is necessarily the right description, and conservative is, with a small c, is not necessarily wrong. I think that in general, certainly justice in liberal democracies it's trying to avoid bureaucratic overreach and the resultant, the terrible results that injustices can inflict on people. Furthermore, they're being constrained by budgetary restrictions without the corresponding reductions in their the duties that they're expected to perform. So what sets us apart? I think that one of the things that I think that we've been doing is we've been not only thinking about what is the technology that our customers will be wanting to use in the future, and we certainly take guesses at it, not always right, and not always right about the timing. So we had guessed, for example, that digital video would overtake analog video a lot earlier than it actually did. But so we take these guesses on behalf of our end users, and we explore those things. And that, I think, accounts for about half of our innovations. And the other half of our innovations come from clever ideas that our end users come up with. So as an engineer, nothing provides me with more pleasure when an end user figures out how to use our technology in ways that we never imagined it. And so we've seen a couple of instances of this during the current crisis, where one of our end users came up with the idea of the contagion report, which basically, I don't know if you've read our little blurb about that, but what we do is when someone is suspected of being contaminated or contagious, we go to the access control system and we can provide a report of who were badged in or passed through a door in close temporal proximity to the
sufferer,
the contaminated, or the person that is thought to be contaminated.
Yep.
And then we can produce a list of people that have to be warned that they have to be tested. And so this was one of these field hospitals that was deployed in the United States by General Simonite. And quite interesting, I got a report last week of how there was, in fact, a case of a person that was, when it was tested, they were able to go back in time and find who were the people that were in proximity to that to him in the past before it was known that he actually had the problem. And so this is an amazing, and so when he pitched the idea, it was right away recognized by Genetec Engineering as really clever, and we were able within about a day to provide him. I told him it'll take me 72 hours. It actually took us 24 hours to give him
that shows flexibility.
Yes, and so we fast tracked his thing. And another thing that came out of this, again, it was. Well, it was someone inside of Genetec that came up with the idea. You know that we have a bistro because the Army marches on its stomach, and it's based on the honor system. We have no cashier, so people basically use their ID cards. They badge in, they declare what they took from the bistro, and it is automatically removed from their paychecks. And it works very well. And so somebody came up with the idea of using this as an honors system dispensary for personally protective equipment. And so that was also deployed in record time at a hospital here in Canada.
Okay. Fascinating. It's amazing how this current pandemic is going to, like any international crisis, is going to create an environment for finding out new uses for current technology that you've got out there, but also enabling fast track development of new technologies that are getting out. You say Genetec's always looking ahead. So what's coming in the future?
Well, as you've seen, is that we have a series of products that help you to be more efficient with the technology. In particular, we have mission control, Clear ID, clearance, Valkyrie, which by the way is developed in the UK, and CityGraph, and these are all based on these are overlays on top of your basic video management system. So and there are workflows to ensure that you either comply with regulations or that you can respond in a normalized fashion to anticipated undesirable situations. So clearance is all about the workflows so that organizations can share digital, multimedia digital evidence and maintain the chain of custody. Whereas, for example, mission control is all about anticipating undesirable situations, automatically detecting them, and then guiding them in to a acceptable outcome. And so these are all kinds of things that we overlay on top of our video management and our access control to help bring our end users to a higher level of security, capability, maturity, without, in such a way that we actually are able to share the best practices that we have learned from our customers around the world, that our customers have figured out and put in these workflows.
Now, one of the things that you led in, and you've been in the space for a number of years, is the smart city side of things. Is that still at the forefront of Genetec's offerings, or has it developed further?
Well, smart city are certainly, I don't particularly like that term, but yes, in terms of helping cities manage the resources that they need to manage in order to provide the services to the citizens. It's a very, very dynamic environment, and they don't have a lot of they don't have complete information. It's really, they have battlefield information, which means it's often incomplete and sometimes contradictory about what's going on. And in face of that, they still have to operate the city and make decisions. So we are focused on providing them tools to be able to do this and do this more efficiently. So just as an example, CityGraph and Valkyrie, what we helped, it was first initially the city of Chicago, but what we helped them do was to bring the skill set and the capability of the crime analyst, which usually was a headquarter function. It was actually brought down not only to the precinct level, but to mobile command center, and so this helps collate the information, actually even in real time when they're carrying on operations. The result of this was in Chicago a reduction of 25% of violent crimes, especially in the two worst districts of the city, such that those two districts which were holding up the crime statistics are actually pulling down the violent crime statistics in Chicago.
That's absolutely fascinating in the use of technology. But as technology develops, as the security environment and the security market develops, if you'd asked me a number of years ago what I thought Genetec was, I'd have said a physical security capability provider that's out there. But most of what we're talking about now is in the software arena. Are you physical security device manufacturer, or are you a software house first and foremost?
We never were a device manufacturer. We use third-party equipment for the very, very rare exceptions. The best analogy I found a couple of years ago was that Microsoft, although they produce keyboards, mice, and Xboxes, is still very much a software company, as is Genetec. So we do have some rare configurations of computing devices that we provide, but this is more as to remove useless work that is repetitively performed by a lot of our integrators, and let them benefit from some centralized analysis of the requirements. But no, we have always been a software company. And in fact, what we brought to security when we came in, and we brought this really out of sheer ignorance, we didn't know the world didn't work the way we were viewing it, and we just carried on, is that we brought the IT way of looking at the problem. And we've done that in the past, and we're continuing this in the future. And information technology actually produces real value for our citizens, but we have to do it in such a way that is that we produce more benefits, and then we create harms, and we have to avoid the harms. I think that it is certainly one of the things we're thinking about a lot is, and not only thinking but acting on, is the privacy aspects, and the things that we're doing with blockchain and the other technologies. One that I'm particularly proud of is the facial the facial masking, where we blur the video Actually, we keep two copies of the video in the blockchain, one that is encrypted and one that is blurred.
Yep.
So we're doing exactly the contrary to what the totalitarian countries are doing, is that we think that you can protect the citizenry without having to resort to infringing on their right to privacy. But the right to privacy is not absolute. So it is balanced off by the right to protect the public. Now, we mustn't. So as a technology company, what we're doing is we're thinking about how to create our technology in such a way as to avoid the false dichotomy of between privacy and security. I think you can have your security cake and eat it too.
Yeah, but I think that brings with it a huge number of challenges, because there's different rules and regulations in different countries. The blurring capability. I think in Germany there's a requirement for every face apart from the target face that there's a warrant that's authorizing the tracking of to be blurred, so that the privacy is preserved. Whereas in the UK that isn't in. It's all to do with the necessity and the proportionality of how things have been gathered and therefore what's being done with it. Does blockchain enable you to look at the different requirements in different countries in a better way, or is that artificial intelligence, or is that just the way you've made your analytical capabilities much smarter?
It's neither blockchain nor artificial intelligence, but what blockchain lets us do is it lets us securely store this information in a distributed records management system, and also securely store the configuration information with highly authenticated encryption, such that there is no repudiation of decisions. So if someone decided to remove or do something that turns out to have been abusive, that they leave this nasty paper trail. Of course, there is nothing that prevents the end user from turning all of these things off, but what we do is we make it more work to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So even in basic security, our guiding principle is we will fail secure, even at the risk of getting an extra service call, just to make sure that inadvertent mistakes as these very complex and large systems are deployed, that they don't result in glaring holes.
Yeah, it's a fantastic approach, because so many capability providers out there fail the other way, in that they require their installers and integrators to make sure all the right boxes are ticked, and bits of coding are put in the right place in the software management systems to make sure that the systems are properly secure. So if you had one or two pieces of advice that you were giving out to the wider security market, from your perspective, what would it be and why?
I have to think about that one, because my traditional answer to that is, and I gave it many years ago, my traditional answer is to hire interns and sit them next to seasoned veterans. The seasoned veterans knows about human behavior, and and they know about the unhappy path. Whereas the interns, they know, the Nintendo generation people, they know how to make this technology do things that seem like magic for the people that don't understand the underlying technology. But you couple these two capabilities together, and we have seen wonderful things emerge from that. And there's many reasons to do that. Sociologically, also, it's a good thing to pass the baton on, and it's good for the young people to feel that the baton is passed to them. So, do I have any other advice? Yes, I have some more advice. This COVID situation has taught us how important the public telecommunication and computing infrastructure is for us to be able to continue our way of life.
Oh, definitely.
And so right now, there is not enough accountability for the executives that make negligent decisions about the stewardship of this infrastructure. In the future, we need to have the executives be accountable. The people that make the policies have to be accountable for their policies. And actually, this is one of the things that we're putting in the blockchain as our system is becoming increasingly policy-driven. The policies are written in a way that are devoid of technical noise and can be authored and understood by the people making the policies in such a way that they cannot plead that they don't understand the technology. They would only be able to plead that they're not smart enough to be executing that the position for which they in which they talk themselves into.
Yeah, so the COVID-19 pandemic is absolutely fascinating. Whatever happens when we come out the other side of it and achieve what we will call normality, that normality is definitely going to be different to the normality before we went into it. Are you identifying any initial pointers that could become lessons that'll come out of it as to suggesting how that elements of that new normality will look?
You know, Bill Gates said an interesting thing in his article last week, and the COVID has actually compressed a lot of technological thinking that used to or would have taken decades. That has now been compressed. So two things that will have changed, but not in an absolute sense, but our thinking will have shifted, if it be it ever so slightly. The first is in the working from home. I remember we used to do a lot of remote work, and I remember the objection to remote work was, well, if they're at home, how do you know if they're working? To which the correct answer is, well, if they're at work, how do you know that they're working?
Yes.
And the situation has forced us, well, not Genetec, because we already had arrived at the conclusions before, but has forced the general society to experiment with that and to actually realize that most people, given the opportunity, will actually do productive work at home. So we're now going to have a better body of knowledge on how to manage, motivate, and make sure that isolation doesn't cause any undesirable psychological effects to people. But we've gotten just that much better at that. So I don't see us stop traveling when this thing is over, but I do think that we're going to be changing our patterns a little bit. The other thing that I think that is going to change, or another technological trend, is that there were many still people that were skeptical about the value and the reliability and security of cloud computing. And once again, they're forced to experiment, and they were, many of them were brought to the conclusion, or will be brought to the conclusion, that it turns out that it's more reliable, or it's more reliable than they thought, and that it is useful, and that some of their fears were not founded.
Yes, the last two things that have happened it was last century that compressed development so much were the First World War and the Second World War, and it's fascinating that this pandemic is doing exactly the same technologically. One final question, if I may: what keeps you awake at night?
I sleep very well.
Fantastic, and I think that's a very good reflection on where Genetec sits in the market, and where your developing your technologies and the support that you're giving and the culture that you have within your company, certainly from what I'm seeing from an outside perspective. Pierre, it's been a real pleasure talking to you this morning for you, this afternoon for me, on the Chatting with Ingram podcast series.
Well, thank you for having me on.